I always thought that a really neat trick to getting students to really care about issues and to research things and take ownership of their information and ideas was to get them to act in a debate. An example of this comes in the Princess Diaries movie.
Satisfied with that. I think Grove should dump the uniforms and we have casual dress all year round. This is a debate. After it's over, once you're back in your school uniform. Hey, whatever you say.
Sit down. He's the man. He's my man.
Okay, Josh. Later. Okay, down, boy. It's a major point. Okay, so now we've all heard from Josh Bryant for the affirmative. I love that sound.
What's my point again? You like our uniforms. They're equalizers.
Now we hear the rebuttal from Mia Thermopolis, who will present the negative argument against our proposition.
When the New Britain Rockcats decided to move to Hartford and change their name, it didn't seem like it made a lot of sense that they would be called the Yard Goats. But if we look into Hartford's history, we see that a yard goat is a term for a work engine railroad switching yard, and it's a part of Hartford's rich railroad history. Maybe it's a little bit more understanding. But if we want kids to understand, then maybe, just maybe, we want them to actually look into the history of Hartford and debate that for themselves. What are some qualities of Hartford that would be worth highlighting in a name of a group? In an editorial in the same day of the paper from the previous that I shared, Change These Names Too talks about West Hartford teams changing possibly racist Connard Chieftains and the Hall Warriors. They say that it shows a narrow 19th century view of American Indians, with stereotype of the nobility, bloodthirsty, and savage-like behaviors. The United Methodist Church says the race-based team names promote discrimination and harassment and reinforce biasness. And children were made to abandon their language and culture. I'm not sure about this because while I am of Jewish orient, I did not know how to speak Hebrew or Yiddish, except for a few words here and there. So I wasn't required to stop my home language because my home language was English. As for Native Americans, I don't know about the various languages that they use. I would think that they would be encouraged to share these languages. but then again, they would need to know English in order to study it in the public schools and off the reservations. I have a clip that I'd like to share with you of some racist ideas that were shared with Americans on television. In the March 18th article, the board keeps team names. The West Hartford Board of Education voted to keep the team names, but to eliminate all references to Native Americans. And the reason that I referenced being Jewish in the past part of this video was because the discrimination noted against Native Americans came from another discrimination. In a soccer game with these two schools, with the Chieftains and the Warriors, students were chanting anti-Semitic marks. So discrimination is really connected, whether it's one type or another. And there were 3 policies suggested by board member Terry Schmidt and Bruce Putternam. They suggested the options for dealing with the mascot issue are keeping the status quo with additional education about Native Americans, which is kind of like what I just did here, or eliminating the names and rebranding them as non-Native American symbols. This is more tricky, but it leads to more education and more of a choice. It also changes history. We have to be careful with changing history. So there's one option. Maybe this more education could also discuss oversensitivity to various things. In the March 23rd article, Historical Society Schedules Forum, one of the participants suggested that King Philip School was offensive because of the history. King Philip, the English name for Metacomet, the leader of the Wampanoag Indian tribe, fought British expansion in New England in the 17th century. The conflict culminated in King Philip's War, one of several Native American uprisings against colonial settlements. So it's interesting to have that history, and yet we named a school for this person who was kind of violent. I thought it was interesting in my own research for my own purposes. You know, I drive a Ford vehicle. Henry Ford was anti-Semitic, and I'm Jewish, so I'm not sure how that looks for myself. But getting back to the Native American issue, in the article, they've decided to get rid of the use of the word Indians on any external papers or documents, and it will no longer be seen on uniforms or typed or written on the website. But does that mean that views have changed, or they're just being sensitive? Maybe we need to look into the use of these words and what it means. The last article in reference to this Native American issue is a challenge to Indian mascots. From March 25th. and it suggests that it does affect the self-esteem of Native Americans in a negative way to have these images of their tribes and chieftains or warriors in such a manner. But instead of reading from the article, I want to talk about a book that I read about Native Americans. And it talks about the narrator going through living on the reservation and yet being in the white world. It's Sherman Alexie's Absolute True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. In reading this, I found it very difficult to understand why Sherman Alexie, who is a Native American, would want us white folk to see Native Americans in that light. It depicts life on the reservation as children who want to escape that life, and yet adults who are all or mostly all drunks and lazy. I don't want Americans to view this, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said Americans, I should say white immigrant Americans, such as myself, to view Native Americans in such a light. But that's what a Native American wanted us to see. So it really makes me curious and makes me want my students and everyone else to learn more about this topic. The Native American video that I used earlier with the tribal sounds suggested animals like the wolf. And this is a very Native American viewpoint, even though I started this video talking about the yard goats, which is another animal. Native Americans see themselves having a spiritual animal to attach themselves to, and that's why I thought it was important to include this article. Wild instincts. Are you a wolf, a bear, a horse, or an eagle? How would you identify with certain animals can determine what kind of professional you are. This article is supposed to talk about what kind of business person you are, but I think it's true for team members as well, since we all consider businesses teams and members of teams working together towards a common goal. I like how it talks about the various skills that people have in emulating these animals. If you want to read more, I'm sure you can't read it in this video, it's way too fast, but look in the Career Builder from Sunday, March 22nd on page K1, if you can find that, and you'll learn a lot of cool facts about animals, such as when a wolf hunts, it sort of nips at the heels of the prey animal to find out that it's an easy prey. Would you want to be named as that?